So if you're an independent comic book creator, how do you deal with the potential reality of tariffs and their effect on your book? Hi, my name is Gamal Hennessy, and I'm an attorney, author, and business consultant who specializes in the comic book industry. And today we're going to talk about the ultra fun topic of international tariffs. Now, just as a little bit of background and context for this video, we're recording on February 4th, 2025, and as of today, there are no tariffs. Well, there are no new tariffs. But yesterday, there were tariffs, and tomorrow, there might be tariffs. So, in this uncertain political and economic environment, it helps to actually understand how to deal with tariffs if and when they actually apply to your comic, whether they apply to the paper that the comic's been printed on, because it's coming from Canada, or it's applied to the actual books that have already been printed because they're coming from China or someplace else that we just randomly decided to slap a tariff on. The first thing you have to understand is this is going to be an exercise in risk tolerance. Risk tolerance is the idea of understanding how much you are willing to lose in the production of your comic before you need to pull the plug. Different people have different levels of risk tolerance based on age, family situations, finances, resources. So there's not going to be one answer on how you're going to adapt to a potential tariff situation, which is why the first thing you need to do is actually figure out how a potential tariff is going to affect you specifically, not how it's going to affect the industry, not how it's going to affect the direct market, not how it's going to affect other publishers, but how it's going to affect your specific comic that you are trying to publish. Now, the way that I'm going to recommend doing this is by basically applying a worst case scenario cost assessment. This means applying the maximum amount of tariff that could apply to, again, both the cost of your paper or the cost of your book or both. The reason that I suggest doing this is if you actually can figure out a way to get your book out the door into the hands of your reader at the maximum level of tariff, then any lower tariff will not hurt as much from a financial standpoint. Now, when you look at the numbers and you look at the spreadsheets and you look at everything else from a worst case scenario perspective, it's not going to be pretty. I can almost guarantee that. But again, if it works in that scenario, it will work in any other scenario. If you kind of minimize the tariff or you assume there won't be a tariff, then it's going to be that much more difficult to actually work through the situation if and when tariffs are applied. Now, once you actually do that worst case scenario cost assessment, the decision on what it is you're going to do depends on where you currently are in the process of publishing your comic. Now, there are three major stages in the process of independent comic book publishing. The first stage is pre-production, where you gather up all of the resources and you make all the decisions that are going to define how your book is published and sold. If you're in that stage, then it might make sense to focus on all the aspects of developing your comic that do not cost money or do not cost extra money while you kind of wait for the tariffs to be put in place or not be put in place. And you wait for the impact to shake out on the industry as a whole. This could mean tightening up your story because, as artists and writers know, the story can always be tightened up and improved. It could be if you are the publisher and you are building the team, taking that time to find the right artist, the right colorist, the right editor, the right letterer for your book. It could mean doing your market research to figure out where you're going to market your book, how you're going to connect with your audience, and how you're going to distribute the book to them. All of these stages take time. And if you're rushing to get the book out the door, you may actually skip some of these stages. But if you know you have to pull back and you know you have to wait, then it makes sense to use that time to kind of build up the pre-production phase of your book. Now, if you're already in production and you're in the process of getting the final pages put in place, you have to determine whether you're going to keep going or you're going to have pencils down. Now, it's different for creator-owned books where you have a specific delivery deadline that you are contractually obligated to meet. You may not have the option of putting pencils down, but there is a clause, or there should be a clause, if your contract was drafted by a reasonably competent individual who understands comic book contracts, that there has to be a force majeure or act of God clause in your contract. An act of God clause basically means that if anything major happens that is outside of the control of you and the publisher, then the contract can be temporarily or permanently stopped with no penalty on either side. Now, you need to actually determine if there's a force majeure clause in your contract and if it applies in this situation before you can actually take the decision with or without your publisher to stop production on the book while these tariffs are in place. Now, if you're in post-production, you already have the final pages. The final pages are already at the printer. The book has already been printed in China, or the book has been printed, is the book is on a boat and it's on its way, and tariffs are suddenly put in place. You have to determine first if those tariffs are applying to you or they will apply after a certain date. Then if they apply to you, you're going to have to determine, and this should have been part of your worst case scenario analysis, the unit price increase that you're going to have to sell to cover that loss, or the price increase you're going to have to put on each issue to cover that cost in order to alleviate the impact of the tariff. The other option is to eat the cost of the tariff yourself, run that issue at a loss. But if you do that, at the very least, you should determine the loss and how much of that loss can be applied to your taxes for potential refund. That means figuring out how much you lost on the whole print run and sales because you were running at a net loss, discussing it with your accountant, and then kind of deducting that in your Schedule C from your tax return. That is not by any means the most optimal situation, but it is some way to kind of hedge your bets and recover your money. Now, if your book has already been pre-produced, it's already been produced, it's already been post-produced, you've already sold it, then congratulations, you escaped the tariff. However, if you're going to make another book, and no comic book career is built on just one book, then you need to collect the data for this book and apply it to the next book with the understanding that the tariffs may also need to be tacked on. Because in this case, you're not using theoretical sales numbers or print cost numbers or anything else. You have the actual numbers. And actual numbers are going to, in most cases, be more reliable and more useful than the theoretical numbers that you're forced to use if you've never published a comic before. So, to sum up, if and when tariffs are applied, you have to figure out how those tariffs are going to apply to your situation specifically, in both where you are in terms of your long-term goals and your personal situation, and the stage that you are at in your comic. So, if you have any questions about this topic or any other topic related to the comic book industry, please feel free to reach out to me with your question, and I will do my best to answer it, although I do not provide legal advice on the internet because that's not how it works. If you would like a one-on-one consultation to discuss the legal issues surrounding your comic or your comic book publishing career, again, reach out to me. We can set you up with a free consultation and get that ball moving in that direction. If you would like to actually join a community of like-minded comic book creators who are also trying to build long-term comic book careers, please consider joining Comics Experience, and the link to that website will be in the notes. Now, until next time, you probably need to get off the internet and go make some comics.